Tēnā koutou katoa, and welcome along to what will be the final program of the Political Pulse. But fear not, listeners, because the Political Pulse is being reincarnated as the Pulse. Now, what does that mean? It simply means that we're going to broaden the scope a little bit, so not sort of focus exclusively on matters political. Maybe we'll have a stronger focus on things that are local or regional, and maybe we'll actually go the other way. And if something international is coming up, you know, if I can get on the phone to Joe Biden at some stage next year and Joe's happy to sort of have a conversation with us, great, be good to talk to Joe Biden. Lots of questions I'd like to ask Joe. So welcome along, and channeling one of the icons of broadcasting in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, everybody. Which once upon a time was good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. And some of you will know that was Aunt Daisy. So, yeah, celebrating Aunt Daisy. I'm joined today by the Arrow FM station manager, Michael Wilson.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, katoa, which is a kind of upgrade of Aunt Daisy. Maud Basham, wasn't it?
Lord Basham.
No, Maud
Basham. That's right, that's her actual name, Maud Basham, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had the book, the Aunt Daisy cookbook.
Right.
And she had all these hints in it.
Yeah.
Because that was back when her presumption was you can do everything yourself.
Yep.
There was a recipe, you won't believe this, for how to make Holland blinds that involved rendering down inner tubes of car tyres, dipping your linen or cotton or whatever it was in it and coating it in rubber,
right,
and hanging it out to dry, and lo and behold, resilient blinds.
Resilient blinds.
Yeah.
She was, I guess, New Zealand's answer to Mrs. Beaton. She was our Mrs. Beaton, and no lesser authority on all matters domestic than the aforementioned Mrs. Beaton herself. So it's great to have Michael here, and I discovered recently that Michael has been with Arrow FM for 20 years, which I think is just absolutely superb.
Nowhere else to go.
Oh, no, that's not quite true. Moreover, for those of you who might have had reason to visit the Arrow FM studios, you'll see that the hallway, as we come into this wonderful studio here, is adorned with awards. And Arrow FM has received a number of awards over past years for the quality of its programming, and when you look at the award certificates, the name Michael Wilson appears on pretty much all of them. So,
but Chris, it is really about our program makers. If my name pops up from time to time, that's great, but you look at lots of them, my name is not there. Okay. And we've had some fabulous program makers. Also, it's not a competition. And if your program represents your community and provides something unique, then it is as good or as bad as anything else around.
Yeah. And I've had an opportunity recently to meet with some of the other program makers, the family. It is a whānau of program makers, and they are remarkable people, and their communities are remarkable communities. And in aggregate, they are our community. They are what makes this place where we live special. So anyway, and it's the right time of year to be reflecting on what's special and to celebrate it. And looking back, Michael, 2020, it's been, if we can use the kind of generic Chinese descriptor, it's been an interesting year.
I thought you were going to come out with a bit of genuine Mandarin there, but
no, it's beyond my ability. Yeah. Apart from
it has been an interesting year, and although that is generally seen as a Chinese curse, I think much of what we've experienced has been good for us and will continue to be good for us so long as we embrace the lessons we've learned and do something with them.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it's. I guess for me, I've only just started at this stage, and it's December, so, to appreciate the fact that it has been that kind of year. And I think I'm maybe not alone in having to kind of just in some ways, accept what's gone before, park that as experience, and try and see the upside. And there are going to be upsides, and who knows, with vaccinations, with the possibility of an opening up of the economy, and let's hope that flows through to really matters, and to jobs and to business activity.
And those are restorative things.
Yeah.
And, we've got to think also of the bonus things that we've got from this.
Yeah.
An understanding of how we can live more sustainable lives, how we don't have to fly across the world at the drop of a hat, how we can attend meetings via distant technology rather than burn up the miles going over the hill. Yes. Or whatever. So those are good things too. Those are positives.
Absolutely. And we've had new words added this year.
Yeah.
What are some of your favourite new words or phrases, Michael?
Well, I put COVID on into everything. I was trying to describe. The Prime Minister's Department has asked for awards for COVID heroes.
Yeah.
And some manager said, well, what about you? You came in all the time. And I said, look, my idea of a COVID hero is somebody who's with a leaky bucket is sluicing out a COVID-flooded house whilst fending off the attack of the COVID dogs and swatting away COVID skeetos. Those are the heroes.
Yeah.
And so we've got a few new words I have COVID skeetos, the rabid COVID dog, and my leaky COVID sluicing bucket.
Yeah, okay, so they're all important. Okay. Pivot is another word that's come up this year. We've all been doing a lot of pivoting. So we pivot from one thing to another to do something different because of COVID.
Right.
Yeah.
You wouldn't like to demonstrate pivoting for our television audience, would you?
No, it's not a move associated with ballet or a move. But it's kind of what's happening between the ears a little bit, and it's that ability to do the kinds of things I think that you did here with the station, with suddenly, okay, how do we operate access radio station under lockdown level 3? And,
I think it's that necessity is the mother of invention thing.
Yeah. So some of us have pivoted using our phones. I mean, the QR scanners and these sorts of things. And we're being told to pivot into our summer holidays by, going away and just having that kind of conversation with yourself. Okay, so if things did turn pear-shaped and I was, at Waihi Beach, what am I going to need just in case I can't get home? Anyway, so it's been that kind of year. Other, characterisations of the year have been a little bit more blunt, even scatological at times. Various kinds of storms, clusters of various kinds. But let's hope that we can put this one behind us, learn from it. But as you say, Michael, one of the things that we have, the sort of team of 5 million possibly has been overdone, but what is real and tangible is that reaching out and sense of community. And if we can sort of, as they say in Wellington circles, a leverage off that, then that will be a very, very good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, now...
So you've been pivoting and leveraging.
Leveraging and learning to do things.
On your mobile phone. The last time I pivoted when I was on my mobile phone, I hit a power pole.
Yes, well, it's always dangerous. They keep on moving those power poles and they don't tell us.
Just like
and what do they expect? People are going to run into them. Okay. Now, when we were last here, Michael, it was you and I, and it's some time ago, and that was following the election, and we were talking about the... the form of the next government.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Now, listeners, and particularly viewers who may be saying, well, what's he doing here because he knows nothing? I'm just eye candy for our viewers, really. Chris, you'll notice that every time it comes to anything complicated that requires an informed opinion, I'll throw to you.
Okay.
But yeah, all right. So we did talk about what the government might look like. You made some predictions, and I think you pretty much got it right, didn't you?
I think we got pretty close. So we, at that stage, the Prime Minister hadn't announced what the shape of the government was going to be. And obviously this was the first MMP election where the result is that one party could govern alone. Unprecedented. So every single MMP election since we introduced the system in 1996, we'd ended up with multi-party government. And in one sense, MMP as an electoral system was designed to actually avoid or kind of encourage multi-party government, because one of the reasons for having it was that people were a bit jaundiced, a bit concerned that single-party majority governments under our arrangements tended to have too much power, could be cavalier, could rip up manifesto commitments, these sorts of things. But we ended up with that. But the Prime Minister said, no, okay, so we have a majority, but we're going to have a relationship with the Green Party. And so what we've got are the two Green Party co-leaders are ministers. Now, they're ministers with portfolios, but they're ministers outside of cabinet. So when we think of the cabinet and that big table up there on the 11th floor of the Beehive, they're not involved in those cabinet meetings. But actually the reality of the situation is most of the hard work, the real mahi, when it comes to cabinet, happens in cabinet committees. I mean, that's the case for life generally, as we know it. Most of the important stuff in Aotearoa New Zealand happens in a committee somewhere. Well, it's the same with cabinet. And those Green Party ministers are on cabinet committees, and they may even be invited from time to time to the full cabinet meeting if there's an issue that they have an interest in and responsibility for, can contribute to. So that's been a little bit interesting. So far it seems to be working, but there's the potential for some risks, though.
Yeah. So largely, it seems that the spirit of MMP has been retained.
Retained, yeah.
You talk about risks. Is that because you feel that as soon as the Greens don't speak the speak that our government wants them to speak, that they can be marginalised? Or what are the risks?
Well, I think that puts it really well. So the risk is, there are two considerations here. One is you want a unified government, and you want, in terms of the optics, people sort of looking at it, that's a unified bunch of people who are getting on with the job. They're not spending time squabbling between themselves. But the other risk, and it's more of a long-term risk, is that when you've got a smaller party, and relative to the Labour Party, the Greens are smaller, the smaller party kind of gets consumed and loses its identity. I guess, for the marketing people, it starts to lose its brand. Its brand. You need to work on your brand. And so, and if the brand becomes indistinct, if you just, then your appeal to the electorate, your appeal to your own core constituents, members, becomes something that could be at risk.
So there's a danger possibly of disappearing altogether, because if you don't get above the threshold in your next election, then you're gone, and it's hard to fight back.
Yeah, to paraphrase Procol Harum, the risk for the Greens is they become a lighter shade of pink.
Yeah.
And that's no good for them. But
I'm wondering, that you were right on the brink of a but, so hang on to that.
I'll hold on to the but.
Do you think that by giving quite high-profile portfolios to the Greens, that is a knowing way of ensuring that they remain in the public eye?
Absolutely, and I think you put your finger on it. So these aren't marginal portfolios.
No.
James Shaw with climate change isn't simply off in the back paddock somewhere, sort of, keeping himself happy. He's front and centre on what the Prime Minister herself has identified as the issue for our generation,
That's right.
Our nuclear-free moment, for those of us who can remember the 1980 1, 2, 3, 4 period. Okay, so that's... But the other thing that's going on here is that the agreement that they've reached means that, okay, so you've got those two Green ministers and they're responsible for their portfolios. And we talked in the past about this notion of collective responsibility. So, on their portfolios, they are bound by this notion of collective responsibility when it comes to Cabinet. So that means whatever Cabinet's agreed, they've got to go and represent it. But on other issues, they have a much greater degree of agency or freedom. And we're seeing that in Parliament in question time. Now, so we've got a Parliament down there. What does Parliament do? It's a House of Representatives that represents us. It's sometimes called the legislative branch, so it makes laws. Okay. The third thing is it scrutinises the executive. It scrutinises Cabinet. And the fourth thing is that it provides for our politicians to come in, to learn the craft and eventually to become ministers or prime ministers. But it's that scrutiny factor. And it's been interesting looking at question time in that period since the government was formed, that Green MPs have not held back. Now, by that, I don't mean that they've been sort of agitated to the point of yelling and
Yapping
screaming and
dogs.
sort of,
No.
It's one thing about the Green Party that the questions are sharp, but they're considered, evidence-based, and they've made it very, very clear that, like some of the opposition parties, they will hold government ministers to account. And that's in the nature of the question. So, government ministers face questions. Some of them are what are known as Dorothy Dixes.
These are the patsy questions.
These are the patsies. Okay. Yeah. What reports has the minister seen on?
Yes.
I don't know.
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked me that question.
Thank you for that question. Thank you. And let me acknowledge that the member himself or herself makes a very important contribution in this area. Now turning to the question.
Yeah.
Yada, yada, yada. But the other questions come from opposition parties. One of the most potentially discomforting questions that a Prime Minister can receive, and you get advice on the questions around 11 o'clock in the morning and question time starts at 2, is, does the Prime Minister have confidence in all her ministers? So you're the Prime Minister and you get that kind of question. What are you thinking? Well, maybe which one is it?
Yeah. You've got something that you're not telling me about. Yeah.
Because the sting is in what's known as the supplementary. So while the Prime Minister may say, of course I have confidence in all my ministers because they are capable and hard-working ministers, then, the supplementary is, well, how then, Prime Minister, do you explain the fact that your Minister for Youth Affairs, Chris Eichbaum, was found in a, shall we say, slightly compromised state in Courtney Place at 3 o'clock this morning. Now, the Prime Minister, of course, being astute and sharp, says, well, as Minister for Youth Affairs, of course, Minister Eichbaum was undertaking field research, which may get... But anyway, getting back to the serious stuff, yes, it's been one of the things we've seen with the Green Party, that they are playing a more important role. And I guess the other issue that has a good deal of salience, including today, where our Speaker is going to appear before Parliament's Governance and Administration Committee, relates to Mr. Speaker Trevor Mallard. And that's an interesting one. He's clearly upset opposition parties with a settlement that was reached with an individual who I think was working within the precincts of Parliament, and Mr. Speaker has himself indicated that he made a mistake by casting aspersions on that individual based on actions that may have been taken which may not have been appropriate but did not constitute the way in which they were described by the Speaker.
Yeah, that's right.
And so a payment has been made, and...
It's tricky, isn't it, when people say, look, this is something that should have come out of his own pocket, and you think, but this is a statement made in the pursuance of his role.
Yes.
He wouldn't be in that situation were he not charged with looking at issues like this. Tricky. Yes, perhaps he needed to be much more careful about how he phrased things. But very hard to be doing the right thing about making sure that things are not swept under the carpet, whilst at the same time making sure that he's not saying ill-advised things about people. Really, really hard to get it right, isn't it?
It's hard to find the balance, and I think with the benefit of hindsight, the Speaker, the Honourable Trevor Mallard, would acknowledge he made a mistake.
Yeah.
Obviously he was committed. He'd commissioned a review of Parliament that was led by Debbie Francis. It came back with recommendations. What was Mr Speaker attempting to do? He was attempting to ensure that working environment is a safe working environment, and patently in the past it has not been safe. There has been bullying, there's been inappropriate behaviour. At times that behaviour has involved advances of a sexual kind which have been unsolicited, aggressive, etc., etc., etc. So yes, his what he was looking for, laudable.
How he went about
it in the that situation, and what he said about one particular situation, clearly not, and he's now. Well, the taxpayers have paid the price. But, I mean, as you say, people acting in an official capacity, and certainly for ministers, and there are some who are being very critical of Mr Speaker at the moment who know better, because they have been ministers, and they have made mistakes, even to the point of having their portfolios and their titles removed from them. And there have been inquiries. And I don't think the High Court judges who actually were commissioned to undertake those inquiries did it on a pro bono basis, did it for nothing, did it for nix.
No.
They were paid money. So, money is paid, sometimes in the cause of securing a just outcome.
Yeah.
And it may well be that for a minister, the outcome was a just outcome where a minister was, say, exonerated, where there was an inquiry. But the point is, there was some cost involved.
Look, I think it's wonderful that we look into that, that we are careful to make sure that public money is very wisely spent. It's great that we live in that sort of society, because there are other governments where public money goes towards defending personal grievance issues that right from the very top,
Oh, indeed, and that anticipates something we'll get to at the end of the program when, we, I guess not to give it away too much, but we've got some awards we're going to dish out. And yes, I think the word that could be used, I quite like it, because I think there might be a degree of, and you would know this, Michael, is onomatopoeia or something like that. Egregious. I mean, egregious. It's a lovely word, yes. There are some egregious examples of money being misspent or being spent to advance the political kind of interests of incumbents, or for that matter, their families.
Or just buy them out of a tough spot, and it's public money doing it.
Get on the phone to Rudy. Rudy, I've got a problem. On the most recent problem, he hasn't had much success with that, and never mind. Okay, so that's what's been going on. We're going to have a musical interlude now, and the musical interlude is chosen not just because it's great music, it's great New Zealand music. It's chosen because of what this song is about. And I spoke in Masterton with the musician who crafted this piece, and I asked him about it. I said, am I right in thinking that this is a song about... tell you about that in a minute. And he said, yeah. He says, I started wanting to write a protest song. So he started wanting to write a protest song, and this is the song that he wrote.
sell sporting goods. I've got a shop not far from Cathedral Square. Everything's from overseas. You won't find a better selection. Look at the way this gun fits the crook of your arm. To make a thing like that, you need to know what you were about. You need to know where you were going, and go there in a straight line. And everything else you'd have to shut right out. Can you see the man who made that? Can you see him putting it down and standing there? Can you see the moment when he said, "That's it, that's perfect"? At a time like that, you wouldn't care about your job or your mortgage or the fight you had with your wife. 'Cause when a man holds a thing well made, when a man holds a thing well made, there's connection, there's completeness. When a man holds a thing well made. It's Wednesday, so I do the mail orders. There's nothing much. Some oilskins and a 303 for a hunter over in Westland. And oh yes, one of those AK-47 for some collector down the line.
So that was Don McGlashan. And the title of that song was A Thing Well Made. And there's a lot going on in the lyrics to that song. It's kind of situated in Christchurch, which is my hometown, so I can identify with a number of the lines there. But as I said, when I talked to Don McGlashan after he did a wonderful show here in Masterton, and he was kind enough to position himself at the doorway and to talk to folk as they left, which is just wonderful. And that's something that's wonderfully New Zealand, that capacity to engage with the performer. I said, that song, A Thing Well Made, you listen to it and it's almost about, bits of it are about craft and taking pride in making something and holding it in your hands and feeling the satisfaction of knowing. But this is about somebody who works, maybe manages a sports goods store. And at the end, he's talking about it's Wednesday and he's dealing with the mail order. And one of the items that's coming through, that's going out to a collector down the line, is an AK-47, a Kalashnikov, what we now know, and we were talking about words before, Michael, that have, and phrases that have come up through COVID. Well, I guess pre-COVID, going back to the events of Christchurch and the mosque attacks, another term that we became familiar with was MSSA, military-styled semi-automatic weapons. Yeah. And an AK-47 is a military-styled semi-automatic weapon. And I think what Don McGlashan was sort of getting to at that stage. So this is, as you can see, from, as you saw, this was a live performance in the Glue Pot up in Auckland. But at the time, and I think we're probably talking about early mid-1990s, we were then dealing with the Aramoana murders down in Otago, in the Otago Harbour. So what's the relevance of that to kind of what we're looking at, talking about today? Well, what we have just received quite recently, just been released, is a report. And I've got the summary version of it here with me today in the studio. So, ko tō tātou kāinga tēnei. Summary of the report of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the terrorist attack on Christchurch Masjid Al-Ain, which I think are the Christchurch mosques, on 15 March 2019. And without, getting into too much detail, it's a report that's well worth kind of reading, because there are so many lessons there about, and there's this juxtaposition in a way about what we've learnt through COVID and the things that have brought us closer together. And obviously this was an event that had the potential to kind of, and was probably designed actually to fracture the community, and failed to do that, because the events down there, as horrific as they were, actually resulted in a coming together of the community as well, and a reassertion of community. So, so encourage folk to kind of read the report. And one of the reflections going back in time is, so Don McGlashan's writing songs about, a protest song about AK-47s being sent to collectors down the line. Well, back in 1997, there was a Commission of Inquiry into firearms in New Zealand. Retired Judge Sir Ian Thorpe. This is 1997. Think where you were in 1997, what you were doing. And there were recommendations in that report, and one of the recommendations was that New Zealand should institute a ban on sale, public access to military-styled semi-automatics. And shortly after the events in Christchurch, one of the people who had assisted with the Thorpe inquiry made the point that if the recommendations had been acted upon, now we can't say with any certainty that this may not have happened or that may not have happened, but there's a possibility that if it had been, if there'd been a ban on the sale of military-styled semi-automatics, maybe, perhaps, things may not have happened. And, we look back over time and no one comes out of it well. Successive governments, in terms of how they shaped the agenda, were more concerned with guns getting into the hands of gangs and criminals, less concerned about public access, lawful access to firearms, Category E firearms that were these military-style semi-automatics. And we saw, the emergence of a fairly significant kind of lobby group representing folk, some of whom may have had quite legitimate reasons for wanting to have a military-style semi-automatic. Those involved professionally, say, in pest control, perhaps. But we saw that kind of lobby. And, one of the interesting things now is that we And it's of interest. Is it of concern? Maybe. As a personal view, do I find it discomforting? Yes, I do. That we now have a political party in New Zealand that is quite openly supported by and responsive to the gun lobby. We have a person who was number 3 on that party's list who's made it quite clear that she sees her role in our House of Representatives as representing the interests of licensed firearm owners. Now you might say, well, that's okay, that's legitimate in a democratic society, that, different points of view are represented. And at the same time, she says, the police have got it wrong and governments have got it wrong. There was no need for the government to move so quickly after the events of 15 March and ban those.
I've got a concern, though, about anybody who sees themselves as being a single-issue politician, because that's not what we put them there for.
Yes.
Look, we've all got our views, and whilst I might feel sympathetic to people who are disadvantaged by changing the gun laws, we all sometimes have to take one for the team. And there are many things about the way society's structured that don't suit me personally, but I'm not lobbying about them madly. Well, perhaps some things I might. Some things I've gone on protest marches about. Very few of them, or none of them, actually have had anything to do with my personal self-interest.
No.
And as a member of society, you have to say society is never structured perfectly for any one group of people. And sometimes you have to say, well, it makes life a little bit harder that we can't have military-style semi-automatic weapons, but on the whole, it's good for society.
Yeah, on balance, it's a good thing that people don't have access to these. And the reality is that you don't need a military-style semi-automatic if you're going off deer stalking. In fact, I think the purist would say it defeats the whole purpose of the exercise for those who are into it. So, I think, I don't want to demonise one particular member of Parliament, but, I think in the interest of transparency, well, it's all on the public record. So we've got the Nicole McKee for the ACT Party. Nicole McKee, who previous government, way back in 2017 when Paula Bennett was the Minister of Police, and she had a whole lot of recommendations coming to her as Minister of Police, said, she wanted to consult with, licensed firearm owners, and brought in 2 experts to provide her with, as Minister of Police, with advice.
By the way, that wasn't a car, an old-fashioned vintage car beeping its horn in the studio. That was my phone.
Oh, it was your phone. That's okay.
The trouble is, as manager of the place, I've got to kind of keep my eye on stuff.
Absolutely. And I'm grateful that you're actually multitasking by managing the whole place and being here at the same time. It's an interesting case study to look back on, actually. And again, it's not the intention to demonise, because, as I say, no government in the period, post the Aramoana shootings comes out looking good. No. This isn't a partisan issue. But, 2017, there was a select committee report, and, we talked before about Parliament and what Parliament does. It scrutinises, it represents, it allows people to have a point of view, and it reports back to Parliament, reports back to ministers saying, this is what you should be doing. Well, that select committee back in 2017 put a recommendation to the minister saying, you should ban military-style semi-automatics. And this was a minister who, in making her decisions, had sought the advice, brought in 2 experts, one of whom is now a member of Parliament for the ACT Party. So it was, I guess, you look back and, the recommendation that she received was rejected.
And we've got to face the harsh criticism now, because we've done a lot of quite justified patting ourselves on the back as a nation about how well we've responded to all sorts of things. And yes, the response post the mosque shootings was admirable and wonderful. But now we have to say what could have been done earlier.
Absolutely, what could have been done earlier. And one of the things that could have been done earlier was actually robust gun laws, and gun laws that allow for competitive shooters to have access to the kinds of firearms that they need. But, I think the case is well made that there is not a competitive sport that requires the use of a military-style semi-automatic. The other wonderful thing about when this was dealt with in 2017 by Paula Bennett, who these days known out as with top-end pedicure, surfing the property wave as a real estate agent in Auckland, is that she proposed, in fact, to give a ministerial directive that the police should improve their consultative processes with the firearms community. Now, one could be incredibly uncharitable and say, and I'll be that person today because I'm being argumentative, that's kind of like giving a directive to the police that they should be consulting with the people who are operating meth labs, just to make sure that, everything's done properly. So anyway, let's just leave that to one side. But I mean, one take-out message from this is an important report. This is an important report which says a lot about how we got to that point. It's an important point for those who have an interest in the intelligence communities. And how did the intelligence communities miss the fact that we had an individual of that kind in our community? Failures in the police vetting around granting firearms licences to this individual. Just incredible if you read the report in terms of some of the referees. But, why was the intelligence community, focused to the exclusion of looking at far-right white supremacists, focused instead on the threat posed by radical Islam? So, okay, those things. All right, so... Okay, that's enough for today, and that's some editorial opinions from me. It's the end of the year. And I think it's the appropriate time to give out some awards.
Yeah.
So we've got 7 awards. Michael, would you like to act as the sort of master of ceremonies and kind of
tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to come over your side because just at the moment the camera's not working on that side. I know why, and I know how to fix it later. So you be Selwyn Toogood, and okay. I'll be Tinica Stevens, and my head's cut off. Those of you who are watching on the telly, but that's all right. You're seeing the best bit of me. The awards then. What have we got?
The first award.
Yes.
Michael.
You announce it and I'll open it and say who's got it, shall I?
Okay, we could do it that way.
Yeah.
So the first award is the Dettol Dr. Strangelove Award for Narcissism, Denial and Various Shades of Madness.
Right. And what was that? The Dettol...
The Dettol Dr. Strangelove Award.
The Dettol Dr. Strangelove Award for Narcissism, Denial and Various Shades of Madness goes to... Oh, it's got a whole picture on it as well. This person. Those of you who are watching on the telly, what does this say? Me, I won. Nobody is more in denial than me. I'm the biggest nasticist in the history of nastyism. I taught Mussolini all he knows.
Okay.
Who could that be?
Who could that be? Okay, so that's incredibly deserving, and the good news is the movers are getting ready to move them out. The bad news is, no, do we need to be serious? No, let's be serious. You've got a country over there that's dealing with major splits. Let's just hope that Joe Biden will be the salve to heal some things. Okay, the second award.
Right, what is it?
Well, this one kind of is leveraging off something earlier.
Yes.
This is the Charlton Heston quote from My Cold Dead Hands, end quote, award.
Oh, right. The Charlton Heston, from My Cold Dead Hands award goes to the ACT Party.
Okay.
For what?
For extending the New Zealand version of libertarianism, and let me give them credit. In the past, we've had no doubt what that party stood for, and good on them. They had a clear political philosophy, a clear kind of sense of what was under it, but they've extended it to support for the gun lobby. So, okay, David Seymour, over to you, but some of the support that's got you to the level of representation you've got now is coming from a group, and I just hope that you can manage that relationship. Anyway,
Right.
The third one. The third one is the Fox News Award for Authenticity.
All right, the Fox News Award for Authenticity goes to... I could use the same piece of paper, you see, because it's Access Radio. We can't afford multiple cards. The Judith Collins Media Minders.
Okay, so
Why
this
would
one...
that be?
Well, this one goes to Judith Collins Media Minders for thinking that a discreet going to the chapel for a photo opportunity of their candidate in a prayer-like pose was a good idea, and for even entertaining the idea that this would be viewed as an authentic act of spontaneity on the part of their candidate. So, sorry, I don't think many people believe that this was imbued with spontaneity other than a choreographed photo op. Okay.
Nobody can set up spontaneity like they can, though.
No. It takes a really good media mind to do that. And the fourth award is the Split Ends, quote, 6 months in a leaky boat award for leaking.
Okay, the Split Ends 6 months in a leaky boat award for leaking goes to those MPs who leaked to the news media over the course of the year.
And we hope it was worth it. There was quite a bit of leaking going on in Aotearoa, New Zealand in 2020. And the fifth award,
yes,
going back to how we started the program, it's the Aunt Daisy, who was known as the Mighty Atom by dint of her stature and the power. And this is for doing the right thing.
Right, the Aunt Daisy Mighty Atom Award for doing the right thing goes to... Oh, I'm so excited, my fingers. The Green Party.
The Green Party get this award for standing firm on the need for tax reform and for putting sound policy first. So kudos to the Green Party for continuing with their argument that in order to actually rebalance things out there, we could well do with a capital gains or wealth tax. We have now the penultimate award, Michael, Commiseration Prize, and this is the Yates Garden Fertiliser Bogor Award.
Right, the Yates Garden Fertiliser Bogor Award goes to... the 43.38% of voters, yes, that's 1,406,973 people who voted yes for cannabis law reform.
So, second prize in a referendum doesn't mean much, but when it's that close, does that justify those in positions of power saying, no, they won, you lost, and now just shut up? I don't think it does. And these are important issues. This is a bit lighthearted, but those are really important issues around health and decriminalisation. So let's just hope the issue doesn't go away, and let's just hope our politicians don't simply say, no, the referendum disposed of it. And we get to the final award.
Oh, did I miss one? I forgot to turn the page. All right, that's okay. I can make it up. Right.
The final award is the Michael Joseph Savage New Zealander of the Year Award.
The Michael Joseph Savage New Zealander of the Year Award goes to the public service.
So not a single New Zealander, although one member of the public service is going to be singled out here. Now, the public service in popular culture, whether it's gliding on or yes minister or yes prime minister, doesn't get a very good rap. Self-seeking, self-serving... not putting the public interest first. And we've got in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I think this is a cause for celebration. And it's another thing that happened in 2020, largely unnoticed, under the radar. We've got a new piece of legislation which forms part of our constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the Public Service Act 2020. So another thing happened in Aotearoa, New Zealand 2020. Brand new act.
So it's not a revision, it's a new act.
This is a new one. This repealed the State Sector Act.
Yeah.
And what it's done, and I think this is unique in jurisdictions around the world, is it's actually said, okay, in terms of our public service and the way it operates, what are the principles that it should operate right? And these are the principles that are now codified. They're actually in legislation. That it be politically neutral. That it furnish the government of the day and have the capacity to furnish any future government with free and frank advice. Free and frank advice. Do it in a fearless manner. Speak truth to power. At times, be the pebble in the shoe. Tell them what you really think. Tell them what the evidence is telling you. don't tell them what they want you to tell them. Don't tell them what they want to hear.
And again, that's in contrast to the regimes that every time truth is spoken to them, the response is to fire the person.
Fire the person. And it's one of the good things we should celebrate. We're celebrating, okay, it's that time of the year. We should celebrate the fact that we are in a Westminster system where we have merit-based appointments, not by politicians but by others. That, if you don't like, what the Attorney General is saying, or you don't like what the Secretary of Defence is saying, you don't just simply get to fire him. And the two other qualities are open government and stewardship. Now, I think in 2020, those principles, those values were embodied by...
You're going to say Dr. Ashley Bloomfield?
I'm going to say Dr. Ashley Bloomfield.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that man who, when we turned on our televisions and we looked at the press conferences, up there with the Prime Minister, up there with ministers, was measured, didn't sugarcoat things.
It was expert.
It was expert, evidence-based. It was science. It was fact. And we compare that, I guess, Michael, to other jurisdictions where there's been the denial of science.
But the other thing is it was also flavoured with genuine goodwill, a desire to do the best thing by New Zealanders, and you could see the heart behind it. And this is also a reflection of the way our politics are moving, and I hope continues to do so.
Absolutely. So the final prize, and it's the prize that in some ways illuminates 2020 in so many respects, goes to Ashley Bloomfield for his leadership, for his compassion, for his intelligence, for his decisiveness, for his integrity, in making a contribution as a leader of a large organisation to getting us through some really difficult times. Others deserve credit too for their contribution, and there are many of them, from the people that Michael was talking about earlier on, those essential workers, through to some of our political leaders. But I think we should give thanks at this particular point in the year, and we should reflect on it. For those of you who will be joining together in reflection of any kind, whether that's in a church, in a mosque, or simply around the dinner table at Christmas, when we give thanks, let's remember and give thanks for people like Ashley Bloomfield. So that's it.
Speaking of Ashley Bloomfield, I know you're just about finished, but I just want to say that he is deservedly, and he has earned the title Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, and we respect that in this country. And if your name is Dr. Jill Biden, that seems to be a problem in a country where the earning of an academic title seems to be viewed with great distrust.
Indeed, and the people who would argue you can only call yourself a doctor if you're actually a medical practitioner have got it badly wrong. Now, in the case of Ashley Bloomfield, of course, he is a medical practitioner, and he's an epidemiologist, and he's all sorts of other things. But as you say, other folk can use the honorific doctor.
Yep.
And some of them, I know for a fact, have worked incredibly hard to be awarded that. So, yeah, we have a little bit more generosity here. So if you've got a PhD and you want to call yourself doctor, you just go for it. Only one word of caution. Don't do it when you're booking a long-haul airline ticket.
Oh, really?
Oh, really? Because if anybody on that flight has a panic attack, they'll go down the list of folk and they'll say, Dr. Michael Wilson, and you'll be tapped on the shoulder. And that film that you were watching, suddenly you can't watch the film, Dr. Wilson, and you'll say, but look, my PhD is in...
Performance art.
Theatre. I have a doctorate in being a thespian.
Well,
they'll say, well, we don't know that, and the person who's having the panic attack doesn't know that. So you just go down, sit next to them and tell them that you're a doctor and everything will be fine. So...
Well, also, as a performing arts I graduate, not that I am, that might be just the ticket to calm down a panicked person.
And only if you had the power to prescribe as well, Dr. Wilson. And on that note, listeners, have a great Christmas. Be safe, be well, be COVID conscious, and we're coming back as The Pulse, and we'll be back in the new year, and I think it's going to be a blinder. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for joining me today for this. Thank you for your management, stewardship, leadership of this wonderful community asset we call Arrow FM. Merry Christmas, everybody.